The galaxy had never been kind to those who ruled it. Across 17 star systems, beneath the light of dying suns and newborn nebulae, the Ascendancy held dominion. For 3,000 cycles, their empire had stretched across the void like fingers of silver and gold. Beautiful, elegant, and utterly merciless, they were the Velshara, a species born of low-gravity worlds where bones grew light as bird wings, where atmosphere kissed skin like silk, where evolution had favored grace over brutality, intelligence over endurance. They had never known hardship. Not truly. Their warriors wore ceremonial armor that would shatter under real combat. Their politicians debated policy in climate-controlled halls where temperature deviation of 2 degrees was considered barbaric. Their greatest athletes could leap 15 feet in their homeworld's gravity, but would collapse under Earth-standard conditions. And yet they ruled, because they had numbers, technology, a fleet that blotted out stars, but empires, like towers, crumble from within. The war had started over a mining dispute. An asteroid belt in the outer reach, rich with rare isotopes needed for faster-than-light drives. The Velshara had claimed it. The Terran coalition had already staked their flags there 3 years prior. Negotiations failed, threats were issued, and then someone fired first. No one remembered who anymore. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the Vel-Asarak expected a swift victory. They had studied humans extensively, catalogued their physiology, their culture, their relatively primitive technology. Earth was a backwater world, recently uplifted, barely a century into space. They had 1 colony, maybe 2, a handful of ships. The war would last weeks, months at most. That was 4 years ago. Now the Velashara capital world of Tharos 7 hummed with tension thick enough to taste. Massive orbital platforms circled the planet like angular moons, bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Below, crystalline cities stretched across 3 continents, their architecture a testament to aesthetic perfection. Towers that seemed to grow from the earth like frozen music, bridges of living glass that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. And in the heart of it all, in a palace carved from a single mountain of emerald stone, Princess Lasara Jean stood before a holographic display showing the latest casualty reports. 7 cruisers lost at the Deneb front, 11 frigates crippled near the Helix Nebula, a supply convoy, 43 ships, ambushed and destroyed before they could reach the 4th Fleet, all within the last rotation. She was tall, even for her species, nearly 7 feet in human measurements, though she weighed barely 120 pounds. Her skin held the faint lavender hue common to the Velshara ruling caste, marked with bioluminescent patterns that traced her lineage back 60 generations. Her eyes were large, amber-colored, with vertical pupils that narrowed as she processed the data streaming before her. Her hair, if it could be called that, flowed down her back in gossamer strands that moved with their own subtle animation, reacting to her emotional state. Right now, those strands lay flat, controlled, concealing the fury beneath. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality of her language even when speaking the harsh consonants of standard coalition tongue. 4 years. 4 cycles of war against a species that barely has fusion technology. And we are hemorrhaging ships at an exponential rate. Behind her, 3 members of the War Council stood in formal attendance. Admiral Thexnor, commander of the 5th Fleet, his armor polished to mirror brightness despite never seeing actual combat. General Vorkash, decorated with honors from putting down rebellions on conquered worlds, rebellions that consisted of Stone Age civilizations with spears, and her brother, Prince Keltharan, heir apparent to the imperial throne, who watched her with the patient amusement of someone who had already decided her concerns were hysteria. "Your Highness," Admiral Thaxtor began, his voice carrying that particular tone military officers used when explaining things to royalty they considered foolish. "The humans are resourceful. We acknowledge this, but their losses dwarf ours. For every ship we lose, they lose 3. For every world we battle over, 10 of theirs burn." Mathematically, Lasarajin interrupted, turning to face him with enough force that her ceremonial robes snapped like flags in wind. "We should have won this war 3 years ago. Mathematically, their supply lines should have collapsed. Mathematically, their morale should have shattered. And yet," she gestured to the hologram, Red markers indicated human positions. They had spread like infection across contested space, and yet they fight harder, longer, with less. They retrofit civilian vessels into warships. They mine their own retreat paths. They use tactics that should not work because they require the crew to accept casualty rates that would trigger psychological collapse in any sane species. They are desperate, Prince Keltheron said smoothly, stepping forward. Where Lysaragen wore military efficiency in her bearing, her brother wore politics like a second skin. Cornered animals fight viciously before the end. This is documented across 1,000 species. The humans are no different. They are very different. Lysaragen's words cut like surgical blades. I have studied them. Every report, every encounter, every interrogation of prisoners. Do you know what their soldiers call themselves? What they volunteer for? Silence. They call it holding the line. They sign contracts that specify in writing that they may be ordered to die, not as punishment, not as disgrace, as duty. They have words for it. Suicide mission. Last stand. Going down swinging. These are not aberrations in their psychology. These are cultural values. General Virakesh made a dismissive gesture. Words. The humans posture with their primitiveness. They glorify death because they lack the advancement to prevent it. When we bring sufficient force, we brought sufficient force to Proxima 4, the Lysaragen said quietly, dangerously. 3 battle groups. Orbital superiority. We controlled the high ground, the supply lines, the population centers. We offered terms, surrender or annihilation. Do you remember what their commander responded? Admiral Thexner shifted uncomfortably. Everyone in the room knew the story. She said, "Come and take it." The hologram shifted, displaying archived footage. The Battle of Proxima 4, as seen from Vilshara gun cameras. Human defenders in armor that looked cobbled together from mining equipment and civilian tech. Weapons that were generations behind standard ascendancy infantry loadouts. Fortifications built from prefabricated habitat domes and cargo containers. They should have lasted 6 hours. They held for 18 days. When the Vilshara finally overran the final bunker, they found 37 human defenders left alive out of nearly 4,000. Not a single one surrendered. Not one. They fought until stunned, unconscious, or too wounded to continue. The last soldier, a woman barely into her 3rd decade of life, had continued firing with a shattered spine, dragging herself forward with her arms alone until blood loss finally claimed her. The footage ended. The room remained quiet. Their homeworld, Lysaragen continued, her voice softer now but no less intense, evolved them in a crucible we cannot comprehend. Gravity twice what most species consider standard. Atmospheric pressure that would crush our bones. Megafauna predators that could kill with casual brutality. Diseases. Parasites. Climate extremes from ice to desert. Tectonic instability. Volcanic eruptions. Meteor strikes. They named their world Earth, and they call it gentle compared to what it used to be. She turned back to face the War Council fully. They are not desperate. They are not cornered. They are not even particularly afraid. They are something we have never encountered before in all our centuries of conquest. They are a species that evolved in hell, survived extinction-level events multiple times, and decided that the appropriate response to the universe trying to kill them was to build civilizations anyway. They are, in every measurable sense, a Deathworld species that somehow achieved space travel before it finished killing them. Prince Keltheran's expression had shifted from amusement to something approaching concern. You speak as if they are superior. They are not. We have advantages they cannot match. Advantages, Lysaragen said, moving to a secondary display, that mean nothing when your enemy does not behave rationally. Watch. The hologram showed a recent engagement. A human destroyer, damaged venting atmosphere, being pursued by 2 Velas Sora cruisers. Standard tactics would demand surrender or retreat. The destroyer did neither. It turned full burn, directly toward the nearest cruiser. Ramming speed. The Vilshara captain had seconds to react. They tried to veer off. Too slow. The destroyer struck at a significant fraction of light speed, and both ships vanished in a bloom of nuclear fire. The second cruiser survived but had to abort its attack run. giving the human fleet time to regroup. 17 crew on that destroyer. Lasarajan said. 17 livers traded for 300 of ours and tactical advantage. By our mathematics, a terrible loss. By their mathematics, an acceptable exchange. This is their doctrine. This is their culture. And this, she gestured at the endless display of red markers, is why we are losing. We are not losing. General Vrakesh's voice rose, his emotional control slipping. We control more territory, more resources. Our production capacity means nothing if we cannot find crews willing to face them. The words hung in the air like poison. It was true. Whispered in barracks, murmured in officer lounges, carefully omitted from official reports. The Velshara Navy was struggling with recruitment. Morale was plummeting. Units were refusing to engage unless they had overwhelming numerical superiority. When human ships appeared on sensors, Velshara captains suddenly discovered critical system malfunctions requiring immediate retreat. They were becoming afraid. Admiral Thaxnar cleared his throat. Your Highness, permission to speak plainly? You may. You have studied the humans extensively. You understand them in ways the War Council perhaps does not. This is valuable intelligence. But understanding an enemy and respecting them are different matters. We must maintain the perspective that we are the superior civilization, Lasarajan finished for him. Yes, I have heard this doctrine my entire life. We are advanced, cultured, refined. We bring order to chaos and lift primitive species into enlightenment. I do not dispute our achievements, Admiral. I dispute our assumption that achievement equals survival. She moved closer to him, and despite being of equal rank technically, the Admiral stepped back slightly. Lasarajan had a presence that transcended protocol. The humans have a saying, she continued, from an ancient philosopher on their world, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. We have not adapted. We fight this war with the same tactics we used against the Korval Rebellion 80 cycles ago, against the Ferrix Uprising, against species that could not imagine fighting us on equal terms. The humans are adapting to us. Every engagement, they learn. They reverse engineer our technology from wreckage. They study our tactics and counter them. They take their weaknesses and transform them into doctrine. They cannot match our ships in quality, so they build them in quantity and crew them with people who volunteer to be ammunition. They cannot match our weapons technology, so they close to knife-fighting range where superior firepower means nothing against boarding parties that fight like rabid predators. Prince Keltharan had heard enough. Sister, your passion for this subject borders on obsession. The Emperor himself has noticed your dedication. Some whisper that you admire these primitives more than your own people. Lasarajan turned to her brother with an expression that could have frozen stars. I do not admire them. I fear them. And so should you. Because when this war ends, and it will end, we will either have learned to think like them, or we will be extinct. There is no middle ground with a species that considers extinction preferable to surrender. The chamber fell silent again. Outside the palace, through crystalline windows, the lights of Theros 7 glittered like a jeweled web. Beautiful, fragile. Admiral Thexnor broke the silence carefully. What would you have us do, Your Highness? You sit on the War Council by right of blood and merit. If you have recommendations beyond philosophical observation, I want to meet one. Every head turned toward her. I want a human prisoner brought here, not to Theros, to secure too much risk of intelligence gathering, but to a diplomatic station. Neutral ground. One of their military officers, preferably high-ranking, someone who can speak with authority about their species, their culture, their reasons. That is insane, General Verkov said flatly. Bring a Deathworlder into close proximity with Imperial royalty. The security risk alone is precisely the point. Lasarajan's eyes gleamed. If we cannot face one human under controlled conditions, how can we expect our fleets to face thousands in open battle? If a single prisoner represents an unacceptable threat, what does that say about our chances of victory? Prince Keltharan studied his sister with new calculation. You want to test yourself, to see if your theories hold. If you can understand them enough to predict them, manipulate them, perhaps turn them. I want, Lasarajan said slowly, to know if we are fighting people or monsters. Because right now our propaganda says monsters. Our soldiers see monsters. Our analysts report monsters. But monsters do not fight like this. Monsters do not have culture, philosophy, art recovered from their destroyed colonies. Monsters do not send rescue missions for their wounded even when tactically disadvantageous. The humans are something else, something we have never encountered, and if I am to help win this war, I must understand what they truly are. The War Council exchanged glances. Politics within politics. Agendas within agendas. Finally, Admiral Thextor inclined his head. I will bring the matter before the Strategic Command. If they approve, arrangements can be made. We have several high-value prisoners from the recent campaigns. Officer-grade humans captured during the fall of our tourist station. I believe there is even a ship captain among them. Arrange it, Lasarajan commanded. Under diplomatic protocols. Neutral station. Minimal security visible but maximum security present. I will conduct the interview personally. Your Highness. General Vrakash began to protest. General, she cut him off, her voice carrying the weight of 3 millennia of imperial authority distilled into a single bloodline. You serve the Empire. I am the Empire. This will be done. Dismissed. They left. All of them. Even her brother, though his eyes promised later conversation. Alone, Lasarajan returned to the holographic display. She zoomed out, showing the war in its totality. Red and blue markers scattered across light-years of contested space. Every red marker was a human position. Outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded, still fighting. She reached out, her slender fingers passing through the hologram, and touched one of the red markers. A colony. Population 300,000. The Velshara had besieged it for 8 months. It still had not fallen. What are you? She whispered to the empty room. What kind of species looks at annihilation and chooses defiance? The hologram had no answers. Outside, the twin moons of Tharos Feven rose above the horizon, casting double shadows across a civilization that had never known what it meant to truly struggle for survival. That was about to change. 3,000 light-years away, in a detention facility built into the hull of a captured human freight station, Captain Jenna Cross sat in a cell designed for beings of half her mass. Her head nearly touched the ceiling. Her shoulders were too broad for the sleeping platform, forcing her to sleep on the floor. The gravity was 60% Earth standard, which meant every movement felt floaty, imprecise, wrong. She had been captive for 73 days. The Velshara were not cruel captors. Exactly. They provided food, bland, nutritionally adequate paste that tasted like sadness and recycled protein. They maintained temperature within acceptable ranges. They even allowed limited exercise periods in a slightly larger chamber twice per day cycle. But they were also not kind. Interrogations happened regularly. Always polite. Always clinical. Questions about fleet movements, ship capabilities, command structure, strategic planning. Jenna answered with name, rank, and service number. Nothing more. According to the Terran Coalition military code, she could withstand interrogation for as long as necessary. She had been trained for this. What she had not been trained for was the boredom, the isolation, the way time seemed to stretch when you had nothing to measure it against except the arrival of tasteless meals and the occasional visit from guards who looked at you like you were a biological curiosity. The cell door chimed. Unusual. It was not mealtime, not exercise period, not interrogation schedule. The door slid open, revealing 3 guards in full armor, though armor was a generous term. It looked like ceremonial decoration more than tactical gear. Still, they carried weapons. Stun batons, mostly. One had what looked like a crystalline rifle. The lead guard spoke in standard coalition tongue, his accent making the words sound like song. Captain Cross. You have been selected for diplomatic interview. You will come with us. Do not resist. Do not attempt escape. Compliance will be noted favorably. Jenna stood slowly, letting her full 6-foot frame unfold in the low gravity. All 3 guards stepped back instinctively. She was not even trying to be threatening. This was just her standing up. She wondered what they would do if she actually tried to be intimidating. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Neutral diplomatic station. You will be briefed upon arrival. Come." They escorted her through corridors of alien architecture, all curves and flowing organic shapes, like the station had been grown rather than built. Other prisoners watched from cells, humans mostly. Though she spotted a few members of allied species, they tracked her movement with hungry eyes, desperate for any information, any change in routine. She gave them nothing. Neutral expression. Steady pace. A captain does not show fear. They reached a transport shuttle. Small, elegant, completely impractical for actual combat, but beautiful in the way luxury vehicles were beautiful. The guards gestured her inside. As the shuttle detached and accelerated away from the prison station, Jenna caught a glimpse through the viewport of the larger fleet nearby. Velshara warships in formation, dozens of them, sleek and shining like chrome fish. Beautiful death machines crewed by people who had no idea what actual death looked like. She had killed 643 of them personally. Her ship, the Defiant Horizon, had been a destroyer-class vessel. Fast, maneuverable, armed just enough to be dangerous. She had commanded a crew of 38 men and women. We knew the odds and signed on anyway. They had fought in 16 engagements over 2 years. Won 11, lost 5 but survived to retreat. The 16th engagement had been the last. Ambush at a supply rendezvous. 5 Velashara cruisers versus her single destroyer. Her crew had fought like demons. Bought time for the supply convoy to escape. Damaged 3 of the cruisers badly enough that they withdrew from the field. The Defiant Horizon had died hard. Jenna made sure of that. When the reactor was critical and life support failing, she gave the order. Ramming speed. Take one of them with us. They had. 1 cruiser obliterated. Another heavily damaged. Her crew 38 souls gone in an instant. Quick. Clean. The way warriors deserve. Jenna had survived because she was in the armored command pod, designed to be ejected in catastrophic scenarios. She woke up in a Velshara medbay, burned and broken but alive. They had saved her life with their advanced medical technology. She would have preferred to die with her crew. The shuttle docked at a larger station. More elegant architecture. More guards. And then, finally, a chamber that looked designed for actual diplomatic purposes. Comfortable seating, though still sized for lighter gravity species. Holographic displays showing calming nebulae images. Temperature controlled to almost comfortable levels. And waiting in the center of it all. Standing with perfect posture. In military dress that somehow combined elegance with authority. A Velshara princess. Jenna knew instantly, even before the formal introduction. The way she held herself, the quality of the fabric, the subtle bioluminescent patterns that marked high caste lineage, the sheer presence that royalty cultivated like a weapon. Princess Lysara studied Jenna with those large amber eyes, vertical pupils narrowing as if adjusting focus. "Captain Cross," she said, her voice melodic but precise. "I am Princess Lysara of the First Royal House, 3rd in succession War Council Advisor for Strategic Planning. I have requested this meeting to better understand your species and your motivations. You may sit or stand if you prefer. I am told human comfort requirements differ significantly from ours." Jenna remained standing. "Why am I here, Your Highness?" Directness. "I appreciate that." Lysara moved closer, and Jenna noticed how she moved fluid, graceful, like a dancer or martial artist. No wasted motion. Despite being tall for her species, she probably weighed less than 130 pounds in Earth gravity. Fragile, but her eyes were not fragile. Her eyes were sharp as surgical steel. "You are here," the princess continued, "because I wish to ask you questions that our interrogators do not. They want tactical information. Force deployments. Ship capabilities. I want something more fundamental. I want to understand why you fight. Because you invaded our space? Many species have given that reason before surrendering. You have not. Why?" Jenna considered not answering, then decided, what was the harm? Let the princess understand. Let her know exactly what her empire was facing. "Because surrender means extinction," Jenna said simply. "Maybe not immediately. Maybe you would be kind masters. Maybe you would allow us to exist as subjects, servants, tributaries. But humanity has learned the hard way, over thousands of years of our own history, that when you surrender your sovereignty, you surrender your future. Empires always promise protection, prosperity, peace. They always deliver subjugation, exploitation, and eventual erasure. We would rather die free than live as pets. Lasarajan tilted her head, a gesture that looked alien and bird-like. You truly believe we would exterminate you? Eventually? Yes. Not with fire, with assimilation. You would educate our children in your ways, teach them that your culture is superior. Within 3 generations, human would be a historical curiosity. We would be Velashara, who happened to have the wrong skeletal density. That is genocide by another name. The princess was quiet for a long moment. Then, your file indicates you chose to ram your vessel into one of our cruisers rather than surrender. 370 Velsara crew died in that collision. You killed them personally. Yes. Do you regret it? Jenna met those amber eyes directly. I regret that it was necessary. I do not regret doing it. They were soldiers. I was a soldier. War is not murder, Your Highness. It is simply the mathematics of survival. You speak of death very casually. I speak of it honestly. Your people seem to think war is a political discussion with weapons. For us, war is existence versus extinction. There is no casual way to discuss that. Lasarajan moved even closer now, within arm's reach. Jenna could see the faint shimmer of her skin, the subtle luminescence that pulsed with what might be heartbeat or breathing or some other biological rhythm. Up close, the princess was beautiful in an otherworldly way, like a sculpture of perfection, unmarred by the brutality of evolution that had shaped humanity. I have studied your species extensively, Lasarajan said softly. Your history is filled with war, genocide, atrocity. You have committed horrors against your own people that dwarf anything the Velausora have ever done. And yet you speak of defending freedom, of preserving your future. How do you reconcile that contradiction? Jenna smiled, but there was no humor in it. We don't, we live with it. We acknowledge that we are capable of terrible things, and we try, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, to be better. But we also know that anyone who uses our past against us as justification for conquest is just adding to the list of atrocities. You don't get to judge us and subjugate us at the same time. You want to criticize humanity's capacity for violence. Fine, but don't pretend you're doing it from moral high ground while your fleets burn our colonies. The princess's bioluminescent patterns flickered. Faster. What emotion did that indicate? Anger? Interest? Fear? You are not what I expected, Lasarajan admitted. What did you expect? A brute. A savage. Someone who glorifies violence and lacks introspection. Instead, I find someone who understands war's horror and wages it anyway. That is somehow more disturbing. Good, Jenna said. You should be disturbed. You should be terrified. Because every human you face feels exactly the same way I do. We know war is hell. We know it destroys everything it touches. We know we're going to die, and we're going to fight anyway because the alternative, submission to your empire, is worse than death. That's what you're facing, Your Highness. Not monsters, not savages. People who have made peace with mortality and decided that some things are worth dying for. Lasarajan stared at her for what felt like eternity. Then, in a gesture that surprised even the guards, she extended her hand. The Vilshara greeting, palm forward, fingers spread, showing no weapons, no claws, no threat. Jenna hesitated, then mirrored the gesture, her much larger hand dwarfing the princess's slender fingers, and that is when everything went wrong. Lasarajan, perhaps trying to demonstrate some cultural understanding, perhaps simply acting on impulse, pulled her hand back in an emotion that seemed designed to be dismissive or testing or challenging, slapped Jenna across the face. Not hard, not by human standards. A light tap, barely enough force to make a sound. The crack echoed through the chamber anyway. Jenna's head barely moved. Her cheek reddened slightly. She blinked once, twice. Process. Lasarajan's expression shifted from controlled to confused to horrified in the span of a heartbeat. She was staring at her hand. Her hand, which now bent at an angle hands, should not bend. 3 fingers clearly broken, wrists swelling already, bones designed for 1/3 Earth gravity meeting the immovable wall of human physiology. Muscle density, bone structure, skin thickness evolved to survive on a death world. The princess had struck what was essentially a brick wall with a porcelain hammer. She made a sound. Small, shocked. Her bioluminescent patterns blazed bright, then dim, then flickered chaotically. Pain. Genuine, unexpected. The guards reacted instantly. Weapons raised, shouting in their melodic language. One stepped between them. Another activated a communication device calling for medical assistance, but Jenna just stood there, expression neutral, watching as the princess cradled her shattered hand, those amber eyes wide with something that looked like revelation. "Now you understand," Jenna said quietly. "That was me doing nothing. That was me standing still. Imagine what happens when we're actually trying to hurt you." Lasaragin looked up from her broken hand, meeting Jenna's gaze. And despite the pain, despite the shock, there was something else in her expression now. Recognition, understanding, fear. The kind of fear that came from realizing, truly, viscerally realizing, that you were made of glass living in a universe of hammers. Medical personnel rushed in. The princess was carefully escorted away, still cradling her hand, still staring back at Jenna with those wide, shocked eyes. Jenna was returned to her cell without ceremony. Stunned by 3 guards simultaneously, dragged through corridors, thrown back into her too small prison. But as she lay on the cold floor, head throbbing from the stun weapons, she smiled. Because the princess had learned something today. Something the Velshura Empire desperately needed to learn. Humans were not strong because they wanted to be. They were strong because anything weaker had died 10,000 years ago. And now finally, the enemy understood what they were fighting. The medical wing of the diplomatic station hummed with sterile efficiency, but Princess Lasaragin barely registered the pristine white walls or the gentle pulse of healing fields enveloping her hand. 3 fingers broken, wrist fractured, microfractures radiating up her forearm. The doctor's specialists rushed in from the nearest medical frigate, worked with practiced precision, their instruments weaving cellular regeneration at the molecular level. It would heal completely within 48 hours. No permanent damage, no scarring, but the memory would remain forever. She had struck a human, a restrained human, a human who had not moved, had not tensed, had not done anything except exist, and that existence had been enough to shatter Velshura bone like crystal against granite. "Your Highness, the pain suppressors should take effect within minutes," the lead physician said, his voice carrying that soothing cadence medical professionals cultivated across all species. "The regeneration matrix will accelerate cellular repair. You will regain full functionality." "Leave," Lasaragin said. "Your Highness, the treatment requires monitoring." "I said leave." Her voice carried command that transcended rank. Royal prerogative. The tone that said disobedience will be remembered. They left. All of them. Even the security detail hesitated before withdrawing to positions outside the medical bay. Alone, Lasaragin stared at her hand encased in its shimmering regeneration field. The bones were already knitting, visible through the semi-transparent medical scanner, calcium deposits forming, cellular structures realigning, damage being undone with technology that would seem like magic to primitive species. But no technology could undo understanding. The human Captain Cross had been right. That casual statement delivered without malice, without threat, with nothing but factual certainty. "Now you understand. That was me doing nothing." Lasaragin had spent 4 years studying human combat footage, analyzing battle reports, reading psychological assessments. She thought she understood. Intellectually, academically, she knew humans were denser, stronger, evolved under harsher conditions. Knowing and knowing were different things. She had felt it now. The absolute immovability. Like striking a bulkhead. Like trying to damage a warship with her bare hand. The human had not been armored. Had not been flexed. Had been standing completely relaxed. And the door chimed. Lasaragin did not respond. It opened anyway. Prince Kaltharan entered with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield. Her brother's expression was unreadable, which meant he was calculating political ramifications at light speed. "Sister," I heard about the incident. Did you come to gloat? I came to understand. He moved closer, studying her hand. The medical report indicates you initiated physical contact. Against a Deathworld species. Against a prisoner who has killed hundreds of our people. I am trying to reconcile this with the sister I know, who has never acted impulsively in her life. Lasarajin met his gaze. I wanted to know if our propaganda was true, if they were truly as dangerous as reports indicated, or if fear had exaggerated their capabilities. And your conclusion? The reports were conservative. We have been understating the threat. Keltharan was quiet for a moment. Then, the War Council is convening an emergency session. Admiral Thixtord wants you removed from strategic planning. General Vrakak is calling for the human prisoner to be executed as a threat to imperial security. There are whispers that you have become compromised, that your fascination with the enemy has become sympathy. Let them whisper. Lasara. He used her personal name, not her title, brother to sister, not prince to princess. You are third in succession. Father is in decline. I am heir, but you are War Council. Your influence shapes policy. If they remove you, if they brand you as compromised, the hardliners will push for total war. No more measured engagements. No more restraint. They will advocate for biological weapons, orbital bombardment of civilian populations, genocide-level protocols. We would lose. They do not believe that. Then they are fools. Lasarajin stood, cradling her healing hand. Brother, listen to me carefully. I have just experienced a fraction of what our soldiers face every time they engage human forces. That captain was restrained, unarmed, had no intention of causing harm, and the simple physics of her existence broke my bones. Now imagine her armed, trained, motivated. Imagine 38 of her crewing a warship with nothing to lose. Imagine thousands of her species, billions of them, all carrying that density, that endurance, that complete lack of fear regarding mortality. She moved to a viewscreen, activating it with her uninjured hand. The display showed a tactical map of the war. Red markers had multiplied since she last checked. 3 more colonies under siege. 2 supply lines severed. Entire sector fleet requesting emergency reinforcements. We are not winning, she continued. We are bleeding. Every victory costs us more ships than we can afford to lose. Every defeat costs them ships they rebuild within months using civilian infrastructure. They retrofit mining vessels into torpedo boats. They use asteroid miners as weapons platforms. They crew them with personnel who volunteer for missions with 20% survival rates. And they do it with discipline, with organization, with strategic thinking that rivals our best military academies. Keltharan studied the map. What would you have me do? I am heir, but I am not emperor. I cannot end this war alone. You can influence, Father. Propose negotiations. Real ones, not the conditional surrender demands we have been offering. Acknowledge them as equals. Offer territorial concessions, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. Anything except continued war. That would be seen as weakness. That would be survival. Lasarajin turned to face him fully. The humans are not going to surrender. Not ever. We can kill 90% of them and the remaining 10% will fight harder. We can destroy their colonies and they will fight from ships. We can capture their ships and they will fight with boarding parties. We can capture them individually and they will resist interrogation until death. There is no scenario where they submit. The mathematics are brutal and simple. This war ends with either negotiated peace or Velar Sure extinction. You cannot know that. I know that every species we have ever conquered was capable of surrender. The humans are not. They have a word for what they do when defeat is inevitable. Scorched earth. They destroy everything rather than let it fall into enemy hands. They contaminate their own resources. They sabotage infrastructure. They make occupations so costly that victory becomes meaningless. They have done this to themselves throughout their history. Imagine what they will do to us. Keltharan was silent for a long time. Outside the medical bay, through reinforced viewports, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of finite beings arguing over territory that would outlast their civilizations. The prisoner, he finally said. Captain Cross. She said something to you, something that affected you profoundly. What was it? Lasaragin looked at her hand again. Nearly healed, the regeneration field flickering as it completed its work. Soon there would be no physical evidence of what happened, but the lesson would remain. She said that was her doing nothing. And then she told me to imagine what happens when humans are actually trying to hurt us. Intimidation. Psychological warfare. Truth. Lasaragen's bioluminescent patterns pulsed slowly. Sadness. Resignation. I have read the combat reports, Keltherin. The detailed ones, not the sanitized versions released to the public. When humans board our ships, when they engage in close combat, do you know what our soldiers report? They report feeling helpless, overwhelmed, like fighting natural disasters given humanoid form. A human soldier in powered armor is nearly unstoppable in confined spaces. Without armor, they are still stronger than our best warriors. They absorb damage that should be incapacitating. They continue fighting with injuries that would kill us from shock alone. She pulled up a specific report. Combat footage from a boarding action. Velshara Marines, 12 of them. Full armor. Combat stimulants against 4 human soldiers in light tactical gear. The footage lasted 47 seconds. At the end, all 12 Velshara were down. Stunned, broken, or dead. All 4 humans were wounded, but still mobile. Still fighting. One was missing an arm below the elbow, had fashioned a tourniquet and continued using a weapon one-handed. Keltheran watched in silence. When the footage ended, he looked ill. How many of our people have seen this? Command staff only. It is classified at the highest levels. If this became public knowledge, recruitment would collapse entirely. And you want to negotiate with these monsters? They are not monsters. Lasaragin's voice was sharp. They are people. That is what makes them dangerous. Monsters are simple, instinctive, predictable. People are complex, strategic, capable of civilization and savagery in equal measure. The humans did not evolve to be warriors. They evolved to be survivors. War is simply survival by other means. Keltheran moved to the viewport, staring out at the diplomatic station's docking arrays. Dozens of ships visible, coming and going. The machinery of empire in motion. If I approach Father with this, he said slowly, if I advocate for negotiations, I will need evidence beyond combat footage and broken bones. I will need something that demonstrates the humans are capable of reason, that they can be negotiated with, that they are not simply death cultists who worship violence. Lasaragin felt something shift in her chest, an idea forming. Dangerous. Potentially treasonous, but necessary. Let me speak with Captain Cross again. Not as interrogator, not as enemy, as diplomat. Let me offer her something real, a pathway to negotiation. Test whether humans are capable of accepting peace when offered genuinely. And if she refuses? If she spits in your face and chooses continued war? Then we have our answer. And you can tell Father that the only path forward is total annihilation or total retreat, because those will be the only options remaining. Jenna Cross was not surprised when they came for her again. 74 days of captivity had taught her that the Velashera operated on patterns. Interrogations every 3rd day. Exercise periods twice daily. Medical scans weekly. Deviations from pattern meant something significant was happening. The guards looked nervous this time. They kept their distance. Weapons raised but hands shaking slightly. One of them spoke in standard coalition tongue with an accent so thick she barely understood. Captain Cross, you are summoned. Diplomatic chamber. Same as before. Comply. She stood, slowly, making sure they saw every movement. No sudden gestures. No threatening postures, just a human standing to full height in low gravity. They escorted her through the same corridors. But this time, she noticed things. Stress fractures in the organic architecture. Hasty repairs to what looked like blast damage. Old, but not ancient. This station had seen combat, probably captured from some other species, repurposed. The diplomatic chamber was different this time. The lighting had been adjusted, brighter, closer to Earth standard. The temperature was warmer. The seating had been replaced with options that looked human-scaled. Someone had done research. Someone had decided to make this space less hostile. Princess Lasarajan stood in the center of the room. Her hand was healed, completely, impossibly healed in less than a day. The wonders of advanced medical technology, but the way she held herself had changed. More cautious, more aware of her own fragility. Captain Cross, thank you for coming. I was brought at gunpoint. Gratitude seems unnecessary. A flicker of something that might have been amusement crossed the princess's face. Fair point. Let me rephrase. Thank you for not resisting. I understand the guards are somewhat fearful after our last encounter. They should be. Yes, they should. Lasarajan gestured to the human-sized seating. Please, sit if you wish. I have requested this second meeting to discuss something beyond academic curiosity or military intelligence. Jenna remained standing. What is there to discuss? Your empire invaded our space. We defended ourselves. This continues until one side cannot fight anymore. Simple mathematics. What if there was another option? There isn't. What if there was? Lasarajan pressed. What if I could offer you not personally, but your species genuine negotiations, territorial concessions, mutual trade agreements, recognition as a sovereign power, peace? Jenna laughed. It was not a kind sound. Your Highness, with respect, your empire has offered peace before, always with conditions, always requiring we submit to ascendancy authority, always demanding we acknowledge Velshera's superiority. That is not peace. That is surrender with diplomatic language. I know, and I am saying we were wrong, that I was wrong. That continuing this war will destroy both our civilizations. The chamber fell silent. Jenna studied the princess carefully, looking for deception, for manipulation, for the angle. You broke your hand slapping me, Jenna said finally. And now you want peace. That seems convenient. It is not convenient. It is necessary. Lasarajan moved closer, but not too close, maintaining distance, respectful of the danger Jenna represented simply by existing. I have spent 4 years studying your species. I thought I understood. I thought knowledge was enough, but understanding and experiencing are different things. I felt for just one instant what our soldiers feel every time they face your people in combat. The absolute certainty that they are physically outmatched, that courage and training and technology mean nothing against an enemy who is simply more in every measurable way. And that scares you, terrifies me. As it should, because I also understand that fear will drive my empire to extremes. Biological weapons, orbital bombardment, genocide. Not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. And I cannot allow that. Not because I care about human lives more than Velshera, but because I care about civilization itself, about the principle that intelligent species should be capable of coexistence. Jenna considered this, weighing sincerity against strategy. The princess seemed genuine, but genuine belief and genuine action were different things. Even if you are sincere, Jenna said slowly, you are one princess in an empire of billions. What power do you have to actually offer peace? I am third in succession. I sit on the War Council. My brother is heir to the imperial throne. If I can convince him, if we can convince the emperor together, policy can shift. But I need something to bring them. Evidence that humans are capable of reason, that negotiation is possible. You need us to prove we're civilized enough to deserve not being exterminated. Lasarajan flinched at the bluntness. Yes, I understand how that sounds, how offensive it is, but I am being honest with you about the politics I must navigate. I need you to give me something I can use. A message, a proposal, anything that demonstrates human willingness to discuss terms. Jenna was quiet for a long moment. Then, you want me to speak for humanity. I am one captain. I do not represent Earth's government. I do not speak for the coalition. I have no authority to negotiate anything, but you can carry a message. When this war ends, and it will end, there will be prisoner exchanges. You will return to your people, and when you do, you can tell them that elements within the Velshera Empire are willing to negotiate genuine peace. That not all of us want continued bloodshed. And why would I do that? Why would I give you information that could save your empire from the consequences of starting this war? Because the alternative is annihilation. Not just of the Velshira, of everyone. If this war continues, if desperation drives both sides to extremes, entire star systems will burn, billions will die, including humans, including everyone you are fighting to protect. Jenna moved to the viewport. Outside, the station's exterior was visible. Elegant curves, artistic design, everything built for aesthetic beauty rather than functional utility. So different from human stations, which looked like industrial platforms because that is what they were. Function over form. Survival over beauty. Your Highness, Jenna said without turning. Humanity has a long history of being offered peace by empires. It always ends the same way. We are told to lay down arms, promised protection, assured our culture will be respected. And within a generation, we are absorbed, assimilated, erased, not with fire but with slow cultural death. That is not acceptable. I am not offering assimilation. I am offering coexistence. Can your empire accept that? Can the Velshira truly share the galaxy with a species they consider primitive? Can you resist the urge to uplift us into your image? Lasarajin was quiet, because the answer was complicated, because her entire civilization was built on the assumption of Velashara superiority, because even now, even after everything, part of her still believed humans were inferior in ways that mattered. I do not know, she admitted finally. But I know the alternative is worse. And I know that if we cannot learn to coexist with humans, we will not survive what comes next. What comes next? Other species. Other death worlds. Humanity is not unique. You are simply the first. There are other high-gravity worlds. Other species evolved under harsh conditions. If we cannot find a way to coexist with you, we are finished. Because the next time we may not get the chance to learn. Jenna turned to face her. You want to use us as a lesson? A trial run for coexistence? That is, trial run for coexistence? That is, surprisingly honest. I am tired of deception. Tired of propaganda. Tired of pretending we are winning a war. We are clearly losing. I want the truth, Captain. I want to know if peace is possible. And I need you to help me find out. They stood in silence for a long moment. Two representatives of civilizations at war. Two individuals trying to find common ground across a gulf of biology, culture, and history. Finally, Jenna spoke. If I carry your message, if I tell my people that elements within the Velashira Empire want genuine peace, what guarantee do I have that you will follow through? What stops this from being an intelligence operation to identify human leadership willing to negotiate? Nothing, Lasarajin said. You have no guarantee. I have no guarantee. You will not use this information against us. We are both taking risks. But that is what peace requires. Mutual vulnerability. The willingness to be hurt in exchange for the possibility of ending suffering. Jenna considered, calculated, weighed options. I will carry your message, she said finally. Not because I trust you, but because my people deserve the chance to choose. If they choose continued war knowing peace was offered, that is their right. But I will not make that choice for them. Something in Lasarajin's posture relaxed. Relief. Hope. Dangerous things in wartime. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You may regret this. My people are not kind to those who advocate surrender. I am not advocating surrender. I am advocating survival. In war, the difference is semantic. The princess moved to a communication console, inputting commands. I am arranging for your transfer back to the prisoner facility. From there, negotiations will begin for exchange protocols. It may take weeks, possibly months, but you will be returned to your people. And then we see if peace is possible, or if we are doomed to fight until one side is extinct. Jenna was escorted back to her cell. The guards were still nervous, still careful, but something had shifted. They no longer looked at her as a curiosity. They looked at her as a threat. Respect, perhaps, or simply fear. Sometimes the difference was hard to distinguish. 75 days of captivity, then 80, then 90, and then on the 93rd day they came for her with different equipment. Transfer orders. diplomatic exchange protocols. She was processed, catalogued, verified, and loaded onto a neutral transport vessel along with 15 other human prisoners. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of weightlessness, cramped quarters, tasteless food, but also freedom. The knowledge that every second brought them closer to home. When the transport docked at Coalition Station Gamma 7, when the airlock opened and Jenna stepped onto human-controlled territory for the first time in 3 months, she almost collapsed. Not from weakness, from relief. Intelligence officers debriefed her immediately. 17 hours of questions. Everything she knew about Velashura technology, culture, military doctrine, strategic planning. She answered everything, held nothing back, except one thing. When they asked about her meetings with Princess Lasarajan, she told them the truth, that the princess wanted to understand human psychology, that she was studying their species, that she seemed fascinated by human resilience. She did not mention the offer of peace, not yet, not until she understood what it meant, what it cost, what it demanded. Because Jenna had learned something in that diplomatic chamber, something the princess probably had not intended to reveal. She had seen fear in those amber eyes. Genuine terror, the kind that came from realizing your entire civilization was built on assumptions that were fundamentally wrong. The Velshar thought they were superior. They were not. They were simply lucky. Lucky that they had not encountered Deathworld species before. Lucky that their technology had developed faster than their enemies could adapt. Lucky that the galaxy had been kind enough to let them pretend strength was the same as power. That luck was running out, and Princess Lasarajan knew it. 3 weeks after her return, Jenna was given new orders. Report to Coalition High Command. Fleet Admiral's Office. Priority clearance. She went, wondering what new assignment awaited, what ship they would give her, what front she would be sent to. Instead, she found herself in a conference room with the highest-ranking military and civilian officials in the coalition: Secretary General, Defense Minister, Chief of Naval Operations, Intelligence Director. And they asked her one question. Captain Cross, we have received a communication from the Velshara Empire, a diplomatic overture, requesting negotiations, mentioning you by name as having credibility. Do you know why? Jenna looked at the faces around the table, saw suspicion, calculation, political maneuvering already in motion, and she made a choice. Yes, she said. I know why, and I think we should accept. The room erupted. Questions, accusations, demands for explanation. Jenna stood, spoke over them, used the command voice that had kept her crew disciplined through 16 battles. The Velshara are losing. Not immediately, not obviously, but they are bleeding, and they know it. Princess Lasarajan, one of their highest-ranking strategic advisors, is trying to find a way to end this war before desperation drives them to genocide. She is offering genuine negotiations, not surrender, not submission, coexistence. And you believe her? The defense minister's voice was sharp with skepticism. I believe she is terrified, and I believe terrified people can be desperate, or they can be reasonable. We have a chance, maybe the only chance, to end this war on terms that preserve both civilizations. We would be fools not to explore that option. The Secretary General leaned forward. Elderly, calculating. Someone who had navigated political waters for decades. If we negotiate, if we accept peace, we show weakness. The Velshara will see it as vindication of their assumption that we were desperate. Let them, Jenna said. Let them think whatever they want. As long as the shooting stops, as long as our people stop dying. Pride is expensive, and we have paid enough. Silence. Heavy. Weighted with implications. Finally, the Chief of Naval Operations spoke. What did you tell her? What commitments did you make? None. I told her I would carry the message, that our people deserved the chance to choose. But I made no promises, no guarantees. The decision is yours. More silence. Then the Secretary General nodded slowly. We will send a delegation. Neutral space. Maximum security. Preliminary discussions only. No commitments. We test their sincerity. If they are genuine, we proceed. If not, we have lost nothing but time. And just like that, the path toward peace opened. Fragile. Uncertain. built on broken bones and shattered assumptions.